Well, thank you for joining us for today's virtually speaking webinar. You'll find today's webinar recording on our YouTube channel, linked on our webpage, tnworks.org, along with all past virtually speaking webinars in our online library. All who registered for today's webinar will receive an email with the link to the recording as well as all webinar materials. As questions arise during the webinar, go ahead and enter those in our Q&A box, and we'll cover them at the end of the presentation during the question and answer segment of the webinar. We do encourage you to follow us on our social media so you'll be aware of future topics and events that we have upcoming. Our Facebook is American Job Centers of Northwest Tennessee, American Job Center of West Tennessee, of Southwest Tennessee, and American Job Center of Greater Memphis. I'd like to introduce you to today's panelist, Matt Marshall with the United Way. So Matt serves as president and CEO of the United Way of West Tennessee, where he's helped mobilize communities across the region to action so all can thrive. He has over 18 years experience in nonprofit and education sectors. He is also the board chair for the Sycamore Institute, board vice chair for AIM High TN, past chair for the United Ways of West Tennessee State Association, commission member for the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. He's a board member for Westar Leadership Program and a board member for TBI's Handle with Care Drug Endangerment Children's Task Force, council member for the Community Development Advisory Council for the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, and a member of the United Way Worldwide Network Accountability Project team. He's also with the United Way's Black Professional Leadership Alliance, National President's Roundtable, and member of Madison County's Children's Cabinet. And he serves on the pastoral team at the historic First Baptist Church. He is a seventh generation West Tennessean, but when not serving in the community, he enjoys spending time with his wife, his children, and his extended family. So that was a really great bio there and very comprehensive of all of his experience. And we're so grateful to have him today to share with us. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Matt Marshall on his presentation on Alice and that livable wage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ginger. I'm very delighted to be here and to have the opportunity to share with everyone today updates regarding Alice, and particularly as it relates to the workforce. And so, yes, I'm involved in a number of different on a number of different boards and different activities. And so I get up really early in the morning. I'm normally up by 3:30 and on the go. I know, Ginger, it's crazy, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm so delighted to be able to share about Alice. And so having said that, I'm going to share my screen with all of you so we can kick into this presentation this morning. And we can kind of go through this together. Many of you will be aware that United Way of West Tennessee began to talk about Alice back in 2019. So it's been almost 6 years. In fact, it was the first big decision I made when I became the CEO here at United Way of West Tennessee was to invest in this report and to begin to advocate for working families across our region. And so, really quick background, United Way of West Tennessee serves 15 counties here in West Tennessee. So every county west of the river except for Benton and Obion County, which have their own small United Ways, and then Tipton, Lauderdale, Fayette, and Shelby County, which are underneath the United Way of the Mid-South based in Memphis. But as Ginger shared, our mission is to mobilize communities to action so that all can thrive. And we do that by bringing together agencies and resources to help communities find strength and share hope. And so that is what we're here to do as an organization. And we do that through partnership with so many. And so, what we want to do is to give our residents hope for a better tomorrow. To help them ultimately participate in the American dream. Having said that, the American dream, has been central to our national identity, not just United Way, but for all of us since the country's founding. There are many ways of defining the American dream, but one widely used measure is the fraction of children who grow up to earn more than their parents. According to Opportunity Insights, that's a group of Harvard researchers led by Professor Raj Chetty. More than 90% of children born in the 1940s grew up to earn more than their parents. But over the past 50 years, this measure of the American dream has been in decline. Today, only half of the children grow up to earn more than their parents. Additionally, confidence in each generation's belief that they are better off or will be better off than their parents has also seen a significant decline, with Gen Xers being the most likely to hold this belief at 57%, but only 43% of the Gen Z population share that same view, with baby boomers and millennials being sandwiched in between. The other thing that is adding to this uncertainty, particularly as we think about the future marketplace, is the impact of AI, which is honestly not really producing any greater confidence. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, their latest report on employment projections, it's noted in that report that the occupations that will most likely to be impacted by AI are software developers and coders, database administrators and architects, lawyers and paralegals, claim adjusters and examiners, insurance appraisers, budget and credit analysts, financial advisors, architects, aerospace, civil, and electrical engineers. Additionally, according to a report that was released by Microsoft in July, other jobs that could be impacted include interpreters and translators, sales reps, customer service reps, telemarketers, PR specialists, web developers, and also market research analysts. So we can say, unfortunately, that the future is filled with quite a bit of uncertainty. But what else is at play that's instilling such a lack of confidence in our communities? Well, for thousands of families in West Tennessee, no matter how hard they work, financial stability continues to grow farther out of reach with each passing day. These families and households are hidden in plain sight. They are struggling, and we label them as ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, employed. ALICE households bring in income above the federal poverty level, but less than the cost of basics in the counties where they live. And while ALICE households have been struggling in the shadows for far too long, the irony is that we all know ALICE. In fact, we're already talking about ALICE. But many have used terms like working poor or the invisible or the forgotten to describe ALICE because often we don't know what other terms to use. United for ALICE, a national research organization from New Jersey whose work is backed by more than 300 experts nationwide, has given us a name and a way to quantify this population that we see and the population we rely on every single day. ALICE can be a neighbor, a friend, a family member, or a colleague. ALICE workers typically include our childcare providers, our retail salespeople, cashiers, waiters, delivery drivers, gas station attendants, and caregivers. Think for a moment about the ALICE workers you've encountered just today. Maybe you dropped off your kids at their childcare center this morning. Then perhaps you filled your gas tank before you started your workday. I know I did. Maybe you went to your favorite deli, or you plan to go to your favorite deli for lunch, or went out to run an errand later on this afternoon to the grocery store. There may be even an Amazon package that will be sitting outside your door right this very moment, or maybe a little while later today. ALICE workers are the engine that makes our economy. They're the engine that makes our daily lives run smoothly. Yet all this time, they've been often again overlooked and undercounted as they live each day, priced out of survival and unable to make ends meet in our region. ALICE families are in a constant battle to make ends meet, often forced to make truly impossible choices daily. Do they pay their heating bill or buy healthy food for their family? Pay for childcare or work reduced hours to stay home with their child? Buy the medication they need or pay the rent? Every day brings a new impossible decision, a new weight to lay on the shoulders of these already burdened and stressed families. And to make matters worse, many ALICE families can't access assistance that they need because they often bring in too much income to qualify. This is what we refer to as the benefits cliff. Even if they qualify for assistance, they're often stripped away as soon as they receive a promotion, often plunging them back into insecurity, as they've not been provided enough time to reach a place of stability. Charlene is a single mother who works full time while raising her two children. While she works to improve the quality of life at childcare centers, she struggles to provide for her family. This is her story.
I am Alice. I'm a divorced mom of two boys, ages 10 and 7. They live with me full time. Due to the birth of our second child, daycare costs exceeded what my salary was, so I quit my job to become a stay-at-home mom. When the divorce occurred, that created an extreme hardship. I had to start putting a lot of bills on credit cards. It wasn't a path I wanted to go down, but I had no choice. So even though I have this full-time career, it's still a struggle. It's still hard to make ends meet. You can't keep a family of 3 afloat on my salary alone. If we don't discuss this and we don't talk about it and we don't raise the awareness, it's never going to change.
Now that we've heard about Alice's struggles from Alice's perspective, let's pull back the curtain on the true extent of hardship in our communities. Here in West Tennessee, the median household income across the 15 counties that United Way of West Tennessee serves is $50,695.60. That's $15,000 lower than the median for the state and $30,000 lower than the median nationally. Often people working the same jobs, doing the same thing in other parts of the state or country make more than those of us who live in West Tennessee. Now, the cost of living is typically cheaper here compared to other places as well. But the total percentage of households categorized as either Alice or living in poverty, those struggling to make ends meet every month, here in West Tennessee, is a staggering 51%. It's every other person you meet. 20% of households are living in poverty, but another 31% are Alice and also struggling to get by. Again, collectively, that represents 51% of our population, and that number has increased by 4 percentage points since we first started analyzing this data back in 2019. The percentage of those living in poverty has actually remained unchanged over that period of time. But that means that 4% of households in West Tennessee that were formerly financially stable have now fallen into instability, even as the median household income has grown by over $11,000 during that same period of time. Put another way, in West Tennessee, over 35,000 households are living in poverty, but another 55,000 households are Alice. Combined, that's more than 90,000 households that fall below the Alice threshold, which is the threshold of average income needed to live and work in today's economy. This is the reality that so many in our communities face, but is often concealed by outdated measures that have long been considered the standard. Yet the success of our community is directly related to the financial well-being and stability of its members. Now, these numbers vary by location. If we look at the entire region broken out by county, we can see that in 2023, which is the data set that we're basing this off of, it always runs about 2 years behind. Households were more likely or most likely to struggle if they lived in Lake County, where 69% of households were in hardship. And they were least likely to struggle in Gibson County at 43%. But even within individual counties, the rates can fluctuate. For example, in Weakley County, 47% of households live paycheck to paycheck in the Dresden area, while in Sharon, it was even higher at 69%. So why is Alice Alice? Well, there are several factors that impact a household's ability to afford basics, including systemic barriers in our communities that are keeping Alice financially strapped, no matter how hard Alice works. But the crux of the problem is the mixed match between the ever-increasing cost of expenses and the wages that just aren't keeping up. To understand this better, we need to look at the Alice Household Survival Budget as you see on your screen. For families in our community, this is the minimum cost of housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, and technology, plus taxes. And for a family of 4 in West Tennessee, the household survival budget, this is a family of four, two adults who have two young children who need childcare. It was $70,000 in 2023. But when we combine the full-time wages of two of the most common jobs in the state, say like a personal care aide and a stock worker, we see that this family with both adults working would have only brought in about $60,000, more than $10,000 short of the cost of basics. And again, if we zoom in on this slide, I don't know about you, but for a family of four, the housing cost that they have here for this survival budget is $864 a month. I don't know anywhere in West Tennessee that a family of four can get rent or a mortgage for $864 a month, let alone some of the other things that are listed as well. So even this budget is tight and hard for most families to be able to even make it to or manage. And when we factor in the federal poverty level, which was $30,000, the dilemma facing countless Alice families becomes clear. When the federal poverty level is used to determine eligibility for assistance programs such as SNAP, well, it's no wonder that there are so many families locked out of the supports that they so desperately need. But how much would it take for that same family of four to operate a stable budget? Well, they would have to bring home over $111,000 a year, or make at least $55 an hour collectively. And therein lies part of our problem. As I shared with you earlier, the median household income here in West Tennessee is just over $50,000. Many families are simply not making enough to participate in the American dream. Well, what types of jobs are they working? These are the top 10 most common jobs in Jackson, Tennessee, which I've only chosen here as an example because it's the most populated area here in West Tennessee. The average salary is $39,000, which tells its own story. But look more closely at the list. Only 4 out of the 10 jobs here produce more than $30,000 a year. So this demonstrates that we have a lot of people who are working jobs that don't allow them to operate a stable budget. Also, Jackson generally has higher salary rates than the rest of the region. So these numbers would be even lower in the middle of our rural communities. And when we look specifically at the working age population in West Tennessee, only 22% had a full-time job with a salary in 2023. And so what that shows us is that, again, for that family who's living paycheck to paycheck, if they get a flat tire on the way to work and are not able to make it, or if they have to call in sick because they or their child is feeling ill, the amount of resources that they will lose out of that next paycheck might not put them back a day or two, maybe not even a week or two. It may put them back a month or two, if not more. And zeroing in on working age adults, specifically in the labor force, most people in the state of Tennessee, 34%, were paid hourly and or worked part-time. So again, as I just mentioned, if they're forced to miss work due to some unforeseen circumstance, that can have a massive impact on their financial stability. Reflecting again on the most common jobs, most of them paid less than $20 an hour in 2023. To put that in perspective, an hourly wage of $20 an hour, or hourly wage of $20 would equate to $40,000 annually if working full time. So again, it's no surprise that of all the workers in these jobs, many struggle to make ends meet. Now, inflation impacts us all, but especially families that are in poverty or that are Alice. Most people are familiar with the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI. This is the nation's standard measure of inflation. It tracks the rising cost of more than 200 categories of goods and services, including luxuries like power boats, jewelry, and scuba gear. And these are purchases that Alice really isn't making. What matters most to Alice households is putting food on the table, making sure the car isn't running on empty, and getting the medications needed to stay healthy. Those are the items that the Alice Essentials Index tracks, the rising cost of specifically the basics. Nationally, since 2010, the Alice Essentials Index has generally outpaced the CPI, especially between 2016 and 2019. During the pandemic, they each peaked at 8%. But in 2024, the CPI fell to 3%, while the Alice Essentials Index is projected to fall only to 5.9%. The Alice Essentials Index for Tennessee has been consistent with the national trend, rising faster than the CPI overall since 2010. And so it's true that many occupations saw recent wage gains, which sounds promising on the surface, but those gains have been overshadowed by costs that have increased even more, meaning Alice is further behind now compared to a decade ago. For example, the median annual wage of a childcare worker in Tennessee jumped 56% between 2010 and 2023, from $8.44 an hour to $13.21 an hour. In 2010, these workers fell $12,880 short of affording basics for one adult and one school-aged child. But by 2023, they fell short even more, by $14,000. Not only have wages been unable to keep pace with the rising cost of basics, but government supports like SSI that benefit Alice don't stretch as far as they need to. This is largely because they're based on the CPI, which conceals how much the cost of basics has risen. For example, nationally in 2010, the gap between the average SSI payment and the household survival budget was about $13,500, because SSI is based on a measure that doesn't adequately reflect the rising cost of basics. In 2023, that gap ballooned to about $23,000. And it's been a similar story for Social Security. Since the Alice Essentials Index better represents what Alice spends money on, it would make an ideal companion to the CPI to help guide eligibility and increases in government programs, ensuring Alice isn't left further behind. So how is education impacting all of this? I will always, confess on the front end that my background is primarily in education, and so I'm a little biased. I often believe when we talk about the work of United Way, when we talk about us investing in health, education, and financial stability, and just general community resiliency, that if you want a healthy community, you want an educated community. If you want a financially stable and a community that's resilient, you want an educated community. And so I tend to dive into these education statistics because I believe they're having a massive impact as well. And I believe the data supports this on the outcomes that we're seeing. Well, our high school graduation rates are at a record high. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, in school year 21-22, the U.S. average adjusted cohort graduation rate for public high schools was 87%. That's 7 percentage points higher than a decade earlier. Here in Tennessee, that number was 90%. So we're graduating a lot of students. But that doesn't mean that those students are adequately equipped with the skill sets that they need to succeed in the workforce. Evidence of this can be found by looking at the reading and math proficiency of this same population. Only 37% of them are proficient in reading, and an even lower 25% are proficient in math. This continues to play out at the next phase of education, having a significant impact on the number of students we have completing college. According to a study done by the Sycamore Institute, only 15.95% of residents in West Tennessee have attained a bachelor's degree. That compares to a significantly higher average of 30.5% across the rest of the state and 35% nationally. And this is important because of its impact on wages. Individuals with a bachelor's degree earn approximately $21,000 more across our state than those who have just a high school diploma. And there's a $14,000 median difference between those with a bachelor's degree and those with a graduate degree or higher. And as I shared about a moment ago, we see this play out locally in the types of jobs our employee base is eligible for. Now, historically, this wasn't that big of an issue here in West Tennessee because we were such an industry-rich region. You didn't need a college degree to get a good job with great benefits. As an example, I'll tell my own family story really briefly. My dad graduated from here in Jackson at Jackson Central Mary High School in 1972. He was 17 years old because they didn't have kindergarten back then. And he immediately got a job at Procter & Gamble, which is now Kellanova, at the Pringles factory. And so he graduated high school, went in straight into that job that summer. And it was his plan to work for 2 years, save up his money, and then go to college. And at the time, he would have been the first family member to go to college. He worked for 2 years, put in his 2 week notice, but his supervisor came and spoke with him and asked him why he was leaving. My dad shared that he was going to college, and his supervisor said, "Well, we can send you to college. What is it that you want to do?" My dad said, "Well, I want to work with numbers and probably, go into accounting." And his supervisor said, "Again, we can do that for you." They ended up sending him to Jackson State Community College to take classes, and then later to Union University to take classes. And while my dad never got a bachelor's degree, he gained all the skills that he needed to then go back and work at Procter and Gamble for the next 30 years as an accountant. And he ended up retiring after 32 years at Procter and Gamble at the age of 48. And so I share that story to say this was a common story for so many people in West Tennessee in the prior decades. And it's less the case today. And it's also the situation in which many of our industry jobs require higher levels of skill than they used to, even to start out. And so again, in many of our communities, our students are struggling to learn those most basic skills. As an example, skills like how to read, as I mentioned briefly earlier. I showed you the scores for proficiency for graduating students. But here in West Tennessee, even in our highest performing school district, which is Dyer County Schools, only a little over half of our third graders are reading on grade level. This metric is so important because children are taught how to read up until the third grade. After that, they're reading to learn. So if they haven't learned how to read by this point, they likely won't. And they will trail behind the rest of their academic careers. This in turn will have a tremendous amount of impact on their long-term prospects when we talk about workforce. And so that I'm clear, this is not a West Tennessee problem. This is a Tennessee problem. But this is also not a Tennessee problem. It's a national problem. And this has been going on since the early to mid 90s. And so there are real solutions that we need to come up with to address this issue. But it's part of why, even in the present, we're seeing such a discrepancy between the number of jobs that we have to offer and that are open and available and a lack of qualified applicants in the employee pool. So while it's not a one-to-one relationship, I do want to point this out as well. When we look at the percentage of students across the same districts that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, comparing them to those reading scores, there's a strong correlation, which is to say, it's hard to learn when the primary source of food you're getting is what you're being served at school alone, when you're showing up to school often hungry. And as you're likely to be much more focused on the next meal compared to the next lesson. And so there are other societal and community issues that are feeding into this issue as well that goes back to these households that are Alice or living in poverty. And this is impacting families of all backgrounds. The greatest number of Alice households by population here in West Tennessee are white families. So the greatest number of them are white households. But Black families are more likely to be Alice at 59%. And so what that is to say is that poverty doesn't care what color you are. So this is not a Black or white issue. Everyone is struggling with this. While 65% of Alice households also are under the age of 25. So what this is showing us is that the families that are most likely to struggle are those who are just starting out and early in their careers. And there are many of us on this call who can probably relate. We remember what it was like to be in that first job or two, and to not have all the benefits yet, or not to have the higher salary levels. Again, if you had kids at that time, paying for diapers and milk and formula and all the things. And then also, here's the other component to point out. 78% of single female households are Alice. Because as we've seen, it's nearly impossible to make it on one income. If we looked at the male single-headed household, we'd see that it's also high. It's above average. It's sitting at around 67%. So again, there is a gender disparity here, but the bigger issue is what I just mentioned. A single outcome just won't make it in today's market. Here are a couple of quotes from Financial Empowerment Center clients here at United Way when they reached out to us for services. One of them said, "I was struggling with not having enough money in my checking account from pay period to pay period. So I would have to borrow from my savings account to cover unplanned expenses." As you can imagine, this means that this client was never able to get ahead. In fact, they were constantly backtracking because as they would pull from their savings account to cover their expenses, that savings account was being depleted, and so was their opportunity for stability. Similarly, this client said, "If it definitely has been difficult for me. I've had a lot of debt, medical bills that we needed to pay. So every little bit helps." So what does the future hold? The answer to that, I think, is ultimately in our hands. We have the power to alter the course for Alice families here in West Tennessee by shaping our future for the better, because when we lift up Alice, we lift up entire communities. It's this type of transformative impact that requires an all hands on deck approach. That's to say that we all have a role to play. And there's no role that's too small. In the words of this Alice mother, every little bit helps. So I've spent a lot of the presentation so far talking about all of the challenges that our community faces. So what can we do to help Alice? Well, my first suggestion would be to implement family-friendly work policies. While we would all love to pay our employees more, and you heard me speak earlier about the need for livable wages, and that we should try our best to do that, there are other steps we can take to support and retain our staff. 2 years ago here at United Way, we developed a toolkit for businesses that provide ideas on how to shape more family-friendly workplaces, which will help you recruit and retain top talent. So I'm happy to send that resource to you. But I also want to invite you to our Alice Summit that's coming up on November 12th here in Jackson. We will have several different folks with us from all different regions and sectors, where we're going to talk more deeply about these challenges, but more importantly, talk about solutions. In fact, the majority of the summit this year will be focused more on that, on how we can begin to work together collectively to bring solutions to our community. I also want to invite you to connect directly with United Way, as we have two programs that we want to extend to you and to the companies that you work at and to your employees as an added benefit free of charge. The first is our 211 emergency assistance line that is handled by our family champions. This is here to help in emergency situations when you or your staff don't know who to call. We can connect your employees with just about any resource across the region and across West Tennessee. We can also provide case management to help your staff access benefits that they may not know they qualify for, such as SNAP, childcare vouchers, and WIC. We also have a tool that we help families with that they access on their phone called Benefit Kitchen. And so it's a free screener. All you have to do, you can try it out right now while we're on this call if you like. You just type benefits, text the word benefits to the number 211-211, and this screener will pop up for you. You'll be able to see it. You can take it yourself. It'll ask you about 10 to 15 questions. It doesn't require any personal identification information like your name or your address or anything like that. It just asks how many people live in your household, what's your household income, etc. It goes through those questions, and when you get to the end of it, it will tell you to the dollar what you may qualify for in benefits, whether they be state or federal, such as child income tax credits and other things. And again, as I mentioned a moment ago, SNAP and childcare vouchers, etc. But we also have our Greater Jackson Financial Empowerment Center with offices in Jackson, Brownsville, and Martin. And as an example just of some things that have been accomplished through that work. Last year, we served 355 unique clients, and we helped those clients increase their savings by over $260,000 while decreasing their non-mortgage debt by almost $1 million. We also have seen them increase their collective credit score points by 7,434 points, and have seen over 1,000 significant outcomes for our clients, with 10 of them having purchased homes. And so that's a service, again, that we offer for free to anyone 18 years old and older here in West Tennessee. And again, we want to make those services available to you free of charge. We don't, it doesn't cost anything to you or your employees or to anyone else in the community to be able to utilize. But again, we want to encourage you to become a part of this work with us, to unite with us for working families, to join with United Way of West Tennessee as a partner in the ALICE movement, because together we can help ALICE families find their path to financial stability. So I'd invite you to visit unitedforalice.org, where you can dig into the data. Some of you maybe are interested in finding out about specific data more in your county or in your community. You can drill down even to the zip code and to even the district level. And so that information is available on unitedforalice.org. So you can look at state level data, county level data, and again, even down to the zip code and district. We also want to invite you to use this research to drive change within your sphere of influence and share your findings with your peers to build even more awareness and spark change in even greater and larger circles. Also, if you know of an ALICE worker or a family who would be willing to share their experiences and help amplify ALICE's voice, please encourage them to reach out to us here at United Way of West Tennessee, or they can also anonymously submit an audio recording at alicevoices.org. And so again, there's so many things that we can do together collectively to help ALICE here in West Tennessee, and we want to invite you into that process. And so I'm going to stop now with the presentation and invite some questions.
Thank you, Matt. That was a very eye-opening presentation for those who have not seen it or, been a part of that before, especially that livable wage for a family with children who are, in childcare. It's a big discrepancy, looks like, from where we are right now. I had a question about one of the slides about the graduation rate and the reading and math proficiency level. So is that reading and math, is that like reading on grade level to be in 12th grade, or was that okay?
So yeah, that's a great
That's a
question.
big difference.
So yes, there are two differences. There's a difference there. So as a student is matriculating through school, they're here in Tennessee, they're taking the 10 Ready TCAT assessment every year, right? And so what that assessment is measuring for is how they're doing in relation to their grade level. So that data that I would have shown that showed the third grade proficiency, yes, that's attached to grade level. The high school graduation proficiency ones are tied to where they should be in preparation for high school and as they get ready to enter into either workforce or university. And so it is it's generally equivalent. But what we're seeing, and the kind of point that I was trying to make, is that the issue is starting at third grade, because if you look at those numbers, it's roughly for most communities about 30, anywhere from 30 and at a high, 50%, 55, 57% of those third grades are reading on grade level. You're seeing that stay the same as they go through the rest of their academic career. They're not really improving a whole lot. And again, that goes back to the reason why is that as far as reading is concerned, they're not being taught how to read after third grade. They're having to read to learn. And, math, while it should be different, that's different. They are being taught advanced levels of math as they go on. It's continuing to be a challenging subject matter for many of our students. And, there are plenty of us as adults who would freely raise our hand and say, yeah, I don't love math. But those are the two skill sets primarily that you need to have greater success in workforce, because you're going to always have to be able to be reading something. And there are a lot of our top level occupations now, but even mid-level, that require a certain level of math fluency. And so those things are really, really important. So thank you for, yeah, that's a great distinction.
It was the third grade reading level or the third grade, the reading versus the income. And I'm assuming you're using that was TCAP, right? That whether they're below approaching or I have fourth graders, so we get those TCAP reports. And so I'm very familiar with the language. So that was a very impactful slide of tying those incomes to the achievement. That was so I'm going to go to questions.
Yeah.
Here's just straight to the questions. Are retired Social Security earners who are also working part-time jobs included in the stats for Alice population numbers in each county?
That is a great question. Yes, they are. And so that is one of the things that sets the Alice data apart from some other data sets. So one of the most prominent ones that exists is the self-sufficiency measure that was developed by the University of Washington. And it is a great tool as well. But what sets it apart is that with the self-sufficiency data, it does not include seniors or households where the main breadwinner or the main person, head of household, is disabled. The Alice data includes both of those populations in its subset. So yes, that's a great distinction. It does include seniors.
Do you know or have handy the number? What is the family size for medium household based on the 50,695 income?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the average family size is here in Tennessee. I could find out that data, but that 50,000 number is just the median for the entire state.
Right.
Or excuse me, let me correct that. That $50,000 is the median for West Tennessee. Remember, the median for the state is significantly higher. It's around $68,000 now, and the national is the one that's closer to 80,000. And so that 50,695 number is the median just for West Tennessee. I have to dig into the data a little bit more to also find out the question, well, what's the average or median household size as far as numbers of people in the household? But I can find that out pretty quick.
If the assistance rate cutoff is below the need, who has control over setting that rate? And are they taking any steps to help close the gap?
Yeah, so this is a really important question. And so ultimately that rate is set by the federal government. I can't remember which department, but as I mentioned when I was going through the slide deck, they're using that consumer price index with some other measures. And so like the federal poverty threshold. And so it's important to realize that some of those measurement tools have not changed since the 1960s. So the federal poverty, the number for the federal for what qualifies you for federal poverty, which is around $20,000 to $25,000, that has not changed since the 1960s. Now, there have been some other measurement tools that the federal government has put in place that have been updated, but they are not always used consistently when it comes to setting these rates. And so the argument that I was making and that we make through Alice is that the consumer price index, which is one of those tools that they often use to set those rates, is not in fact enough because it is not taking into consideration a number of other variables that families have to contend with. And so, arguably, the way that we go about making that change is there's two different ways. There's a state side of it and there's a federal side of it. And so many of us know that within the state government, there are decisions, there's policy and legislation around things like minimum wage and benefits and how much a family has to make or not make in order to qualify for those benefits. Those do not always have to align and match up with the federal limits. In fact, in many states, they don't. And so we have the flexibility within the state of Tennessee to pass legislation that would, potentially increase minimum wage if that's something that the legislator would want to do. Or they could also change in the amounts of, so instead of like aligning with the federal poverty, level, they could raise that amount or lower that amount or whatever to adjust for benefits. And so that would be a potential route to take. The other would be to do the same thing at the federal level, to advocate for those for two different things, either for those levels to be changed, or, and this is what we're arguing, for the measurement tools that are the basis for the levels to be updated and to be more accurate with what American families are actually facing.
Does the financial empowerment team come out like on site to a workplace to assist employees? So if there were a group of employees that could benefit from the services, do you do on-site, remote?
We have, and we would love to do more of that. And so we have shown up at employers' locations in order to do workshops and things like that. But yes, we have had conversations with a handful of employers about, having a Tuesday or something where we come in and we do sessions like during the morning for their employees. That is absolutely something that we would be interested in doing and coordinating. And so as always, they can get in contact with us and they could set up virtual calls, or they could set up phone calls or in-person calls and come to our office. But we would, be delighted to have the opportunity to come to some places of employment and to do those sessions, there in person.
Moving on to the next one. These are from local employers. Is the Tennessee single parent percentage higher or lower than the United States average? Do you know?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. I do know that it is higher.
Okay.
And that's one of those things too. It varies from community to community. And so in some communities, that percentage is going to be higher. You're going to have more single female headed households and some single male headed households. That percentage is going to be higher. And then you're going to have some communities where it's going to be lower. A great resource to look into that data is the State of Child Report that's produced by the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. They release a report every single year, and by county, they break down those numbers. And so you're able to see the number of households in each county of Tennessee that are single led households. They also show a number of other very enlightening and illuminating statistics as a part of that report. And so again, I do know that the state of Tennessee is higher than the average for the nation, and that there are pockets and counties of Tennessee where those numbers are even higher than other parts of the state.
Do you know if the state of Tennessee is providing any incentives for new or existing child care facilities? This is an employer, and she says they're dealing with the child care availability shortage. That they have people, I'm assuming, who could work, would like to work, but can't get into child care. So, do you know if there are any incentives or if they're being incentivized to open new child care facilities?
Yeah, so I actually know a lot about this subject. So my background, before I came to United Way, I actually ran a childcare center. I was the executive director and head of school for Hands Up Preschool. So this is something I'm incredibly passionate about. And the other part of our family champion work, alongside the 211 system and calls that we answer for community members, is that we also work very closely with childcare centers to try to help them in their expansion. And so, yes, there are incentives that are provided by the state to help with the expansion of childcare. As far as I know, as of right now, these are still live. And so, for childcare centers that are either new or trying to expand their existing services, there are $100,000 grants that are available to them. The $100,000 is the cap, where they can go into their facility and improve or expand their facility, and it's $1,000 per child. That's why it's $100,000 a cap. It's $100,000 cap because it goes up to 100 kids. So for $1,000 per student, they can get resources. It is reimbursable, so they have to be able to have the resources on the front end to be able to do that. But they are incentivized to do so. And then there are some other similar type of programs that the state has started through the Department of Human Services that help with the expansion. So over the last several years, they have increased the amount of reimbursement for child care certificate programs. So families who are able to access child care and they get a voucher, essentially a child care certificate that helps cover a portion of the expense. And so that program has been expanded over the last few years. Governor Lee even signed legislation this past spring that put more money into that pot. So that's all positive. And that was also with the aim to help expand childcare, because as those childcare centers are getting more money to come in through reimbursement, they should be able to then reinvest back into their programs to be able to open up additional classrooms and expand. So that's the idea and thinking behind that. Having said all that, that's all the positive side. The last week and a half, we've gotten some really negative and not so great news. And so about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, the state was notified by the federal government that our CCDF fund was going to be significantly decreased. That's the Child Care Development Fund, is what CCDF stands for. Those are federal dollars that are allocated to every state in the nation. And so they all get a certain amount of funding. And ours was cut due to our latest census data. And so this had been delayed due to the pandemic for the last few years. And now this is going into effect as of October 1st. And so what it is based on is the number of children in the population of the state that qualify for free and reduced lunch. Well, that number is lower than it was compared to the last census. The percentage is lower. Now, being in the field that I'm in and looking at the data that I look at, I think there is a very valid argument that the actual number of children is not lower. And I think we could look at, probably find some data that would actually show you that the percentage is not. But here's what's going on. There are several districts across the state of Tennessee, school districts, who qualify for free and reduced lunch, but don't accept it because they don't want the stigma that's attached with that. And so there's been a huge shift over the last 20 years or so in that area. And so there are a handful of districts here in West Tennessee that qualify for free and reduced lunch for large portions, sometimes even entire districts, and they don't accept it and they don't submit it. And so that's, potentially playing a role in this. But ultimately what this meant is that the state of Tennessee lost $44 million in the last 2 weeks in the CCDF funding. And that has led to a number of repercussions. TECTA programs, which are the licensing programs for childcare teachers, some of them are being shuttered. And so that's not all public news yet, so I won't put out who those are, but some of those are being shut down. We also are seeing some other grants and support services like CCR&R, Child Care Resource and Referral, which provides training for child care centers, ongoing training and development, and support for the expansion of child care. We're seeing that budget was cut by $13 million out of the 44. And so there's going to be some huge cuts there, not to mention some other support programs that exist in the state, like Aim High Tennessee, of which I serve on the board, and others. They saw a $3 million out of their $5 million total annual budget, $3 million got cut. And so, so there are significant challenges. The other repercussion that speaks directly to this question that the person asked in relation to workforce. I was having this conversation with Kyle Spurgeon, the president of the chamber here in Jackson last week, as I was updating him on some of this. And I was telling him the other thing that we found out, and this went out on Friday across the state with some other clarifying documentation that came on Monday, that as of right now, for those families so Tennessee, let me provide some context. In the state of Tennessee, there are two programs that qualify families for child care assistance: Smart Steps and Families First. Smart Steps, if I remember correctly, is for those families. I sometimes confuse the two. Smart Steps is for families that are below the federal poverty threshold. Families First are for those who are above it. So many people didn't even know that program existed, but you could make above the federal poverty threshold and still qualify for child care assistance in the state of Tennessee through this program. In fact, you could make a pretty decent wage and still get assistance. That latter program has now been frozen as far as new applicants. And so that is going to represent a big challenge, because those are primarily the families who are working, right? Who are in many of these places that need the assistance, but they're supporting industry. And so that has been frozen as of this last week. they're still accepting applications, but they're putting them on a wait list until further notice. And so that's going to represent a big challenge. And so we need employers, we need industry to speak up about this, even as they've been doing about childcare these last few years, and making sure that the state knows that we need this support. Because I want to add one more thing. There was the TANF Opportunity Act was passed back in 2021, which dealt with the reserve TANF funds that had ballooned to $750 million at that time. That TANF Opportunity Act legislation provided a mechanism for that money to be spent down. Having said that, as part of the legislation, they were supposed to keep a reserve fund that was not to be no more than $191 million that, as per the legislation, was for a rainy day. Well, when we get cut $44 million in federal government funding for childcare, it's a rainy day. So we need folks to speak up, speak with their representatives, their legislators, and let them know, hey, we need this support in our communities for the support of business. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but I'm passionate about it.
Fine. So we just have one more, and we'll wrap up. I know we're getting close on time. Will you just go over just briefly one more time about the 211? Because you mentioned it, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood how people can use that to pursue benefits or see if they qualify for benefits that could help them get back into the workforce.
Absolutely. So, so our 211 is an emergency assistance hotline. So it's a phone number that you can dial here in West Tennessee. When you dial 211, it'll ring our office. And what it does is they'll hear a voice message, and then it will direct them to the family champion that serves their community. So we have it divided out by counties. And so it exists to be able to help people get resources or support when they're looking for assistance and don't know who to call. And so, so we have connections with nonprofits and organizations all across West Tennessee. And so whatever it is that they're looking for, we can generally try to assist them to find that help. But we also then funnel them to our Financial Empowerment Center for counseling services if they're so willing. And we funnel them to other support services as well. And as part of that financial empowerment component, we have a collaboration with the American Job Centers and others to also try to support their workforce development. Because here's the number one thing we see with our Financial Empowerment Center clients. Many of them, as you've seen in the report today and in the presentation, they're ALICE. Now, we sometimes have clients that are not, but a lot of them are ALICE. And so what we see very often as we're going through counseling with them is that they're not making enough to operate a stable budget. They're running into issues of wages. And so we try to guide them. We don't want them to quit their job, but we want to help them better manage what they are already receiving and what they're spending, while at the same time, providing them access to other benefits and services that they may not know that may help ease that burden. And so people can dial 211, they can go on our website. We have a 211 hub as well where they can use it as a resource directory. But yes, please, by all means, reach out to us. We want to be a help, and we want to help your employees, when and if they have situations of need. Okay. And then I think the other component was the benefit kitchen. You can text benefits to 211 for the screen.
Okay. So informative. We really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for sharing your presentation with us. We will want to let all attendees know that we will send out a link to the recording of this presentation that can be watched at their leisure. They can share it with others that could benefit from it. And we will also include the slides that you provided today so that they can go back to those and really look through them. There's a lot of data in there, a lot of good stuff. So I want to make sure everybody has access to the slides as well. So we will get all of that sent out in the coming days. So thank you so very much for joining us and for the wonderful presentation. And we appreciate everybody's time and attention this morning. So thank you.
Thank you.